What's going on, movie fans? Welcome to episode 2 of the Real Takes podcast here on WSBC Radio. I'm your host, Dan Sisk. And, well, I told you last week that I wasn't exactly sure what this week's episode was going to be until I realized that Agatha All Along finished up its run. My plan was to review television shows on this podcast, but not until the shows were completed. And I honestly did not know last week that Agatha All Along was coming to an end, so that's why I wasn't able to prepare you guys last week for it. But yeah, we're going to be talking about this show. I have a lot to say about it. A lot of mixed thoughts, a lot of positive, some negative. And I'm really interested in the discussion that we're going to have. I think we're going to have a lot of nuance and complexity to it, and I'm looking forward to that. So, overall general thoughts. I thought the show started off quite poor. I feel that the only way you're going to really enjoy the first 2, 3, 4 episodes of the show are A, if you are a diehard, and I mean diehard, MCU fan who will just suck up all of the stuff that they give you, and you know, you love it just because it's Marvel. Or B, if you really buy into the camp storytelling that they are going for. This show is extremely campy. It is extremely silly. And as we discussed last week when talking about the Venom movies, that is not a style that I particularly enjoy. I understand that it is a lot, it can provide a lot of people a lot of joy, and a lot of people are really into it, but I'm not one of them. I felt that this show, particularly in the first half, really prioritized its political agenda, which I was not completely on board with. It has a lot of ham-fisted commentary. It has a lot of ham-fisted characters that really don't serve a purpose in the story. And as a result, it becomes very muddled, and it becomes very all over the place. It's supposed to be an Agatha Harkness spin-off show from WandaVision. However, the show is spending so much time developing new characters that it really can't focus on Agatha, and as a result, there's absolutely zero focus. However, much to my surprise in the second half, because I was not expecting the second half to go the way it did, it really just becomes a show about Catherine Hahn's Agatha Harkness and also Joe Locke's character, which I'm not going to reveal his identity in this episode because this is a non-spoiler review. But it really becomes a two-hander, and after that, the show becomes infinitely better. It becomes far more focused. It becomes far more controlled, and as the show gains a lot more substance to kind of offset the campiness, I began to enjoy it a lot more. I actually felt that the second half, in contrast to the first half, had a slew of moments that were for me. I definitely felt that the first half of the show was a show that wasn't for me, and yet the second half of the show had bits and pieces that definitely were, and I really wasn't expecting that, given where the first half was going, and also considering the fact that this is from the same creative team as WandaVision, which was a show that I was not crazy about. I really felt that show dropped the ball in the second half. I know a lot of people feel it's the best Marvel show. I do not agree. But I was definitely surprised by how truly emotionally moved I was, particularly in the first half of the finale, where it becomes essentially a 30-minute origin story for Agatha. I quite enjoyed those parts of the show, and I honestly feel that, considering the entirety of the series, this is a show that you should watch. Now, I should add a caveat to the top of this. This is not a show where you're going to like it in the first 2 or 3 episodes. Again, I felt that they were really rough, but that's largely because I'm not the target audience for this show. You can watch the trailers for this show. I'm not going to get too political on this show, on my podcast, but you can watch the trailers and you can instantaneously realize that this show is not made for the primary MCU fan base. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I am saying that limits the show's appeal. So if you are willing to get through, basically the trailer represents the first half of the series. If you can get through the first half of the show, I feel that the second half has a lot of meat on the bone and a lot of substance, and I ultimately felt that the show was worth my time. However, I don't as a whole, feel that the show was worth Marvel's time, and I'll be getting to that in just a little bit. But next, we're going to talk about the cast. Kathryn Hahn is so good on this show. She's much better here than she was in WandaVision. She has the comedy, her comedic timing is second to no one in the cast. She is hilarious. She is creepy when she needs to be. She's disturbing when she needs to be. She is a disturbed person when she needs to be. There are a lot of dramatic moments for Agatha, particularly in the last 2 episodes, and Kathryn Hahn nails those bits. So I thought she did a spectacular job. Joe Locke, who was on Heartstopper on Netflix. I don't watch that show. But I heard a lot of people were praising Joe Locke's performance on that series, so I was interested to see what he did here. And while he began as a character who was nails on a chalkboard annoying, by the end, the character really came into his own. And as we got more information on his origin, and as he got the opportunity to participate in more action sequences, I found the character a lot more compelling. I know that's very vague, but the surprises surrounding Joe Locke's character are some of the moments in the show that I don't want spoiled for you. Aubrey Plaza plays a mysterious witch that has a connection to Agatha's past. And again, I really can't talk about the role because there are so many surprises with her. But I will say that if you were a fan of Aubrey Plaza before, you're going to love her now. I've never been a huge Aubrey Plaza fan. She never particularly impressed me, whether it was in recent movies like Megalopolis or even her older television work like Parks and Recreation. She was never a standout for me. However, I realize that she has a lot of fans, and I think those fans will eat her performance up with a spoon upon watching this. So I think that if you're an Aubrey Plaza fan, you need to watch this instantly, because she does a very, very good job. And the character becomes, again, far more compelling in the second half of the show compared to the first half. Also, shout out to last member of the cast I want to shout out, Patti LuPone. She had a very small role, but she gets her own standalone episode 7. That's all she told from her perspective. And I thought that her performance was very, very good. And she's obviously a Broadway legend. But she made the most out of her one of the few film and television appearances that she makes, and I thought that her episode in particular was quite well done. So overall, I think the action sequences are decent. They aren't very flashy. They clearly do not have a large special effects budget, so they can't afford some big witch heavy action sequences, which is something that was something I wanted from this show. It did not provide that. However, overall, I felt that the action, while scarce, was good enough. So if you're there for just the action sequences, I don't know how many of you there really are, but if you're there for action sequences, they're fine. They're passable. I think they'll do the trick. However, I want to segue from Agatha real quick and talk about the MCU at large, because I feel this show, even though I liked a decent chunk of the second half, I feel this show is kind of indicative of a lot of the issues that are plaguing superhero content overall. So let's just be honest. 2008, the superhero genre became a big deal with Iron Man and The Dark Knight. And ever since then, it's been the golden age of the superhero movie. And as someone who grew up reading a lot of Marvel comic books and a lot of DC comic books from my local comic book store, that is something that I have really been enjoying. I've really enjoyed this period, despite the fact that I am shocked at how long it's been going on. Obviously, movies go in waves. You have the crime dramas of the 70s, the big blockbusters of the 80s, the comedies of the 90s. I mean, movies always go in trends. And the superhero genre is definitely, we're nearing the end of that trend. The box office records are becoming scarcer and scarcer when it comes to superhero content. I know Deadpool just made $1.3 billion, but that was very clearly an outlier. And overall, superhero content has definitely been oversaturated by all of the major studios, and people are becoming sick of them. So if you have to limit the number of movies and television shows that you are making, and that's exactly what Marvel is doing. They have cut back on a lot of the content that they're putting out. They're limiting the number of movies they release per year. They're limiting the number of television shows they release per year. I really don't see what the benefit is of utilizing one of those slots for a project that does not have a wide net of appeal and does not directly appeal to the primary audience for superhero content. Me, Dan Sisk, I am the primary audience for comic book entertainment, okay? I'm a straight white guy. I'm the primary target audience. I would also comment and say that I think it's admirable that the studios are trying to appeal to other groups. I want other people to like what I like. I have no problem with that. But I think where the issue is that a lot of the efforts at diversifying the franchises, the franchise at large, is that a lot of these efforts are becoming disingenuous, and they're becoming something that a lot of studios just can pat themselves on the back for, as opposed to actually telling stories with characters that people care about. And I think Agatha All Along is one of the examples of a show that on paper is an admirable effort to appeal to a different fan base from the primary Marvel Cinematic Universe fan base. The issue is that, considering how few movies and shows are getting made by Marvel at this point, I don't understand the appeal on the part of Marvel to utilize one of their slots for, again, a show that has such small appeal. As I said, the first half of this show for me was tough to sit through. It was not what I wanted from Marvel whatsoever, and I can see why a lot of people would love it, but clearly not a lot of people do. The ratings are slowly coming in for this show, and they have been declining on the Nielsen charts every week. So clearly the audience for this show is not large. So the people that this show appeals to simply don't care about superhero content. Which leads to my next question. Disney, why are you wasting time, energy, and resources towards making superhero content for an audience that does not care about you? Please explain why. Star Wars is having the same problem. Did anyone here watch The Acolyte? I bet you didn't. And that's because the vast majority of Star Wars fans are not the kind of people who would watch The Acolyte. And The Acolyte had awful ratings and it was canceled. Agatha All Along is a miniseries, so it won't get the stamp of cancellation from Disney. But I suspect that it will be a long time before you see any of these characters' stories continue, solely because not a lot of people watched it. Not a lot of people cared. And again, in an oversaturated marketplace, Agatha Harkness is the character that you're focusing on. Look, WandaVision, again, like I said, a lot of people loved it. I wasn't one of the people who loved it. I thought it was okay. But I don't think anyone came away from WandaVision thinking to themselves that we needed an Agatha Harkness spin-off show. I'm willing to bet money on that. And I just feel that a show like this, despite not being that bad, really is a waste of time. And Marvel, after all the goodwill that has been burned away with terrible movies like Thor Love and Thunder and Ant-Man Quantumania and the Marvels, all the goodwill that Marvel once had has almost completely been burned away. Marvel does not have the time, energy, and resources right now to be devoting towards projects that aren't appealing to the primary MCU audience. And I feel that this show, again, despite not being that bad, shouldn't have been made. It just shouldn't have been made because it's not a priority for anyone right now. As for the state of the superhero genre as a whole, I feel that this show, again, falls into a lot of the issues that a lot of superhero content has fallen into these days, and that is empty promises. I talked a lot last week about Venom: The Last Dance, and I was talking about how Spider-Man not being in an entire Venom trilogy and never fighting Venom resulted in a Venom trilogy that was just one big empty promise. It didn't lead towards anything. And I think that an Agatha Harkness show without Scarlet Witch, Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda Maximoff, again, is another empty promise. We're just spinning wheels. We're not going anywhere. We're not progressing the story. And again, why? I think at this point, people are very clearly not going to support content if they don't feel that they are getting a lot of bang for their buck. And by that, I think we clearly mean entertainment. And honestly, Agatha All Along, if you're not into the campiness, you're not going to be entertained. And that's a very serious issue. I love the superhero genre. I don't want it to die out, but I'm very honest with myself about the current state of the genre, and I think it's very clearly on the verge of death. And I think shows like Agatha All Along just continue to the oversaturation of the genre. They just add to the exhaustion that people have for keeping up with all of these interconnected stories. And as a result, no one's been watching the recent Marvel content with the exception of Deadpool. No one saw Ant-Man Quantumania because everyone said it was bad. No one watched Echo. No one watched, obviously, Agatha All Along. No one watched the Marvels. And I think that the trend's just going to continue. I think Captain America 4, no one's going to see. I think Thunderbolts, no one's going to see. I have a lot of faith that Fantastic Four, which comes out next summer, I have a lot of faith that that will be a hit. But that's just because the Fantastic Four are Marvel's first family, and the fans have been clamoring for a proper comics-accurate adaptation of that team for a very, very long time. So I just think that Marvel's in a really tough spot right now where they've just burned all of the goodwill. And as a result, people just are not going to be willing to give the first half of Agatha a chance. They're going to tap out within 2 or 3 episodes, and they're not going to see the good parts that are in the second half. And while part of me is upset at that because I do feel that Agatha was ultimately worth my time, keep in mind, I'm a hardcore Marvel fan. I'm the target, I'm someone who will watch this stuff regardless of whether or not other people are watching it. And, I'm in a very, 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 very small group of people. And I'm very honest with myself about that. I don't pretend to be watching populist entertainment. For example, I'm very confident that most people who listen to this show listened to my take on Venom and then turned it off when I started talking about Conclave. And that's fine. But I'm not doing myself any favors by lying to you or myself about that. And so I feel that being honest with yourself is really a big deal when it comes to the current state of superheroes. And Kevin Feige and Jack Schaefer and all of the people at Marvel should have been honest with themselves and asked whether people truly wanted to watch an Agatha Harkness spinoff. And I think that the answer they would have come to, and I think the answer that most people are going to come to, is a resounding no. So that's pretty much it for my thoughts on Agatha All Along. Ultimately, look, if you're a hardcore Marvel fan and you're interested in the next chapter of the MCU, get through the first half. You'll find stuff in the second half that you'll enjoy, I promise. If you are a hardcore fan of this type of show, this kind of campy, cheeky, female-centric content, then I think you'll really like Agatha All Along. If you like Aubrey Plaza, and Patti LuPone, you'll like this show a lot. But I think if you're the primary Marvel fan, this is the kind of thing where you can just watch clips on social media and get the gist of what happened. And honestly, I don't think you'd be missing too much. I'm sorry to report that, but again, we got to be honest with this stuff. And at this point, we got to be more honest than Marvel is. So that's pretty much it for episode 2 of The Real Takes. I hope you listened to my slightly discombobulated rant about Agatha All Along. Here's the context. I'm a big superhero fan. I grew up watching this stuff, as I'm sure a lot of you did. And I just want to see it succeed. And I don't see a lot of success right now. And I feel it's my responsibility as the host of a podcast like this to call it out and to try to encourage Marvel and DC, for that matter, to get better and to try to improve their content, because I think at the end of the day, all we want is great movies, and we want great shows, and we want these stories to continue, and we want these characters that we love to continue to find success in the mainstream. Right now they're not, but they once were, and I have faith that possibly they can again. So that's it for episode 2, again, of the Real Takes podcast here on WSVC Radio. Tune in next week where one of my most anticipated movies of the fall, Heretic, starring Hugh Grant, comes out. It's a new A24 horror flick. And watch the trailer because it looks absolutely incredible. The early reviews out of the festival circuit have been stellar. And I truly cannot wait to watch that movie. I'm sure that we're going to have a very, very interesting discussion next week. So I hope you'll tune in. Until then, this has been The Real Takes with Dan Sisk, and I'll see you next week.
Hey there, listeners. I'm Matt Boyer, station manager of WSVC Radio. If you like what you're listening to, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and hit that bell button to be notified with all of our newest updates. Every day, one of our shows is releasing a new episode. Stick around and stay tuned.